I'm not going to start with any easy questions.
What would you do if you couldn't fail?
I was vulnerable in the sense of I was just who I was.
In my journey as an entrepreneur, I really found who I am as a human.
I was much more emotionally available to everyone because I was much more balanced.
Finding the grace and the humor in the balance of it all.
Whatever happens in the gut happens in the brain, and whatever happens in the brain happens in the gut.
Do you have a specific morning routine?
I was able to sort of reset my nervous system by getting involved with the cold.
Allow ourselves to have imperfection.
Absolutely had mentors, absolutely 100% had coaches.
A wake-up call to me that I could not try to be something I'm not.
Seeing results of just isolating the breathing was having these tremendous impacts on my physiology.
Work at a gratitude practice.
What the hell am I doing? Can I really do this? Is this really worth it?
90+% of the decisions that we make today actually stem from fear.
When was I proud of myself today?
I think for me, it's really inspiring people to step out. And you don't have to step all the way out.
Then there are these other moments of magic and joy.
If we can just push into discomfort, we actually find that on the other end, there's a lot of benefit.
What's your purpose?
Nothing starts without a plan. Nothing ever goes to plan.
I think we're going to see a new realm of healing that ultimately wasn't available to us.
If we can bring a practice into our lives that helps us be more vulnerable.
So much of entrepreneurship, I truly believe, to anybody on this call is grit.
I got involved with Wim. I just love the guy. He's just a great human. When people are on the path, they shine.
We so often convert things into flaws as opposed to strengths.
We all deserve to be happy, healthy, and strong.
I'm so thrilled that this content is getting out there, that you guys are promoting bold and vulnerable message and aspirations for people, because I hope that we can all really live that every day.
Hey, this is Jessica.
I'm Svetlana, and you're listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast,
Where we aim to inspire others to live authentically through sharing the bold and vulnerable stories of peak performers across a variety of industries. All right, welcome to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast. This is Jessica. We've got Svetlana here, and our special guest this week is Shervin. And Shervin graduated from the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he majored in computer science in the College of Engineering. And he also has a technology management certificate from there as well. He worked as a software engineer at multiple startups and large enterprises for multiple years, and now he teaches yoga and he works in operations at a yoga company. So huge shift in Shervin's life. He's a really tremendous inspiration, not only to me as a yogi and somebody who worked with Shervin in the past at Core Power Yoga, but also I believe that Shervin's an inspiration for a lot of male yogis out there who are maybe scared to take the deep dive into yoga and really what it means and what it's all about. So welcome, Shervin. We're so glad to have you on the call today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I kind of gave a little bit of a bio, but maybe in your own words, kind of tell us your story of moving from, this world of technology into becoming a yogi, and maybe there's a nice vulnerable story that you can add in there about how you found yoga and how you decided that you were going to shift your entire life.
Definitely. So kind of the whole story. Yeah. I studied engineering, and I started working doing software engineering for a couple of years for different companies, and I think that was all kind of inspired through my parents. They really pushed the concept and idea of like being an engineer and like having a safe job and living kind of like a safe life, kind of the whole typical get a nice job, have a family, buy a home life path. And after I'd gotten the job and started working, I was like, okay, this is not what I really want in life. I kind of want something different, and I totally get that life path, and that's appropriate for like plenty of people. But I felt like for me, it just wasn't like a fit for my personality and the wants and needs that I had. And that's when I decided, I think it was like a 6-month process. I used to journal a lot and reflect. And looking back, I think my journals showed like 6 months before I quit my tech job, I was already thinking about leaving that role. And once I finally pulled the trigger, I decided that I was going to take a year to kind of explore life and figure out what was interesting to me and really not do anything. And that's when I found yoga, and I was like, yoga's kind of cool. I've heard it's hip. Let me try it. And I started doing more and more yoga, and I fell in love with it because it was not only like a mental practice, but a physical practice as well. It was like two in one deal. And after I started practicing, I kind of got invited to to learn how to teach. And I was like, that's cool. And I slowly kind of moved more into the yoga world. And it went from just being a student to being a teacher to actually working in the operations of the business and like applying all my business skills and some of my tech skills into the yoga world in that time. And throughout that same period, I was also exploring my other interests of like making videos. And I started making videos for a variety of companies. And then I decided to focus more on just yoga videos. And I started doing online courses for yoga teachers. I did yoga retreats. I did a lot of different like yoga events. And that all came into where I am now, where I teach yoga. I help with operations at a yoga company. And then I also make a lot of videos for that same company.
That's amazing. So I want to pick apart what you just gave us. There's tons of nuggets in there. So what's the story of how you actually found yoga? What was the moment that you said, this is my thing? Is there kind of a moment that you can bring us back to when you were introduced to it, maybe by a friend, or how you found the practice?
It's a great question. I feel like that's, this is also part of my personal philosophy as well. There's never like a light bulb switch. There's never like a one moment thing. I feel like it's almost like when you build a home, the home is never really complete. It's kind of like you're putting brick by brick by brick, and over time it becomes something else. And I think that's what it was for me. It was going to class every day, going to class, meeting people. It was just like consistent actions that I took that compounded over time that created this effect of, oh, I like it a little bit more. Oh, this is actually a lot of fun. I'm going to go twice today. Oh, usually I do this on the weekends, but instead I'm going to go hang out with my new yoga friends, or I'm going to go to this yoga event. Or I got invited to move to San Francisco. I used to live in Orange County, and I got invited to move to San Francisco for a new role. And I was like, yeah, why not? And it just was like those little things that added up that became like, oh, this is more interesting. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes and do more and do more. And then there was never really one point. It was just like an addition of little pieces, little actions that kind of turned into that, if that makes any sense.
It does. Yeah. It's all about the practice, and it's habitual to, go and be in your mind, and then you say, hey, I kind of like it here. I kind of like what this does for me. And then keep going back and going back and going back, and it compounds into something that you're like, hey, this is actually my life now.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing with like a relationship almost. Like there's someone that you're interested in, and you start hanging out with them a little bit more. And maybe for some people, it's like, it was love at first sight. But for me, like any relationship, it's like, we like hanging out. So we hang out maybe once more next week, and then it's twice more. And then over time, it's like, all right, now we're like really good friends, or we're like in this really deep relationship. It's the same thing in that regard as well, I think.
Did you feel, or do you still feel pressure from your family, after shifting from technology? I know you kind of slightly touched on that your family really wanted you to have a steady, stable career, which is actually what you made this yoga movement into. But, do you still get that pushback, or when you were going through that transition, did you feel that pressure from your family?
100%. And I love making videos, so I want to make a documentary about this one day. But I've recorded every step that I've taken in this life journey of telling my parents, so when I first got a yoga job, I told them about that. When I first moved to San Francisco for my yoga job, I told them about that. Now I live in Denver, and I told them about the move to Denver, and I recorded every single moment in video and audio form. And every single time they're like kind of like shocked and taken aback and like didn't believe it. And at this point, now that I'm kind of in an office a little bit more, they're like, oh, this seems like more of a real job, but it's not. So I was raised by immigrant parents, and the top three categories are you're either a lawyer, engineer, or doctor. So it doesn't fall in those three categories that they believe are quote unquote real jobs in their belief system, but it's still in an office with a consistent paycheck. So like they're able to rationalize that better as a more stable life path. But I still get like pressure. Like they came and visited me this past week, and they're like, where's your desk? Like, what's your name tag? What's your job? Like, what do I tell my friends what you do? And how much do you make? And like, they just wanted to know almost how they would describe it to other people. Like they want to feel like they can almost brag about me in some sort of way. That's kind of the vibe I get.
All the parents want to brag. So,
Yeah.
For the people that are listening, you mentioned your parents immigrated here. Maybe walk us through that. Where did your parents come from? What is your like background culturally, and maybe paint a picture of that just so people can understand kind of where you're coming from, where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my parents grew up in Iran, and they were born there, they were raised there, and then there was a revolution that happened in 1979. At that time, my father was actually living in the United States, studying in Colorado, and my mother was trying to find her way out of the country. And at some point, they both found each other in the United States, and they decided to stay here just because of the radical changes that happened in their country, their home country. And then since then, I was the firstborn. They had me, but kind of where they come from, I think there's a lot more instability, not only in the country, but also in survival paths. I think in the United States, there's a lot of opportunity. It's a lot easier to kind of survive and have a stable job and make money kind of almost anywhere. And where they came from, it was always a struggle. I think my father came from a very poor family. He grew up in a village with like almost no electricity. It was a very small place. And I think their intention and inspiration for their children was they wanted their children to kind of live a comfortable life. And that, I think, inspired the thought of, hey, we want you to have these top 3 stable jobs that make a lot of money over time and are also respected on like a social scale as well, not only like financially, but socially as well.
So I'm curious, how did that sort of environment impact you mentally and emotionally? And you were born in the United States, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I was born. Yeah.
So yeah, how did that energy impact you? Because I have immigrant parents as well, and I was born in Russia. But like, and I have a lot more, I feel a lot more of the stability and opportunities as well. And with that, for them, it's the same thing, a lot of instability. How did that impact you?
We're getting real deep.
That's what I like.
I think in the beginning, it impacted me in a way that I wanted to kind of follow that journey and that path. And I was like, that makes sense. Like, I should do what they say. Like, they're my parents. And there was a point in college where I was like, wait a minute, I have the ability to think on my own. I can make my own decisions. And although they have a different perspective, they did grow up in a different region of the world and almost like a different time zone in a way that it still impacts me to this day, where I have these like habitual thoughts and habitual things of like, oh, I need to be safe. I need to like hold back. But at the same time, I have this new way of thinking of like, oh, it's okay to take risks. It's okay to be different. It's okay to try things that might not be normal in that field of view. So it's almost like a battle between the two. I'm getting pulled in 2 different directions. And yeah, I'm trying to like push myself to think in more of a way that's open-minded almost, or trying different things and being more risk-taking.
So how would you, so you know who GaryVee is, right?
Yes.
So a lot of the things that you mentioned earlier about how like, well, what do we tell our friends what you do? He talks so much about that with parents being like, stop putting that kind of pressure on your kids. Like, who gives a shit? It's like, I think it's just this mentality of it's almost like showing off a trophy in a way, like we've accomplished something, we've achieved something. But so I'm curious with that, what are the things like, so you've adopted this new mindset. Can you walk us through, how did you get to this new mindset? How do you maintain it? And what sort of advice would you give our listeners? I know that's a lot of questions.
Yeah. So how did I adopt this mindset? And what got, I think it's all in the same bucket. I would say the number one thing was the internet, honestly. And it's information. It's information. The internet is one of the best mediums of getting a variety of information. And I think like I've watched Gary, and like his goal is to like spread that different thinking and spread like these new ideas. And when you expose yourself to different ideas, to different ways of thinking, it allows you to kind of open up your mind to be like, well, maybe this is a different way of thinking and I can try that as well too. To see what best fits like your own personal needs, your own personal lifestyle, your own personal personality. It was in college. I think college, it first started with like my friends having a different way of thinking, and growing up in a different culture and being surrounded by those. Like from 0 to 18, you're surrounded by your parents most of the time and you get fed a certain kind of information and certain ways of thinking. But once you go to college, you're surrounded by a whole different group of people and you're fed a different way of thinking and you're just surrounded by different behaviors. And that was like the first step to opening my mind up. And then it was just going on the internet a lot, reading different articles and like watching a lot of videos and like just expanding my mind through that. And I think that's when like I was able to learn and think in a different way and be like, okay, I can take on these actions and try these different things and like, yeah, almost make these new connections that I didn't have before, or like these new realizations of like, oh, hey, yeah, maybe my parents are just trying to be a trophy and like they have good intents, but at the same time, it could also be a little selfish too. So just be aware of that. And like, it's okay for me to be selfish and kind of go against what they want. I think that inspired that. So it's really, I think it's just surrounding yourself, like knowing what you want in life, I think is what the key that I figured out. And then surrounding yourself with those types of people. And you don't have to be in a physical location that has those types of people, like listening to podcasts, watching videos, reading articles, reading books, like all of that, I think is the new age of surrounding yourself with other people. So like if you want to be more like GaryVee, or if you want to be more like someone else, like watch their videos and over time you'll take on their ways of thinking and kind of be a little bit more like them. And I think that is one of the most fascinating and like coolest things in our generation, because you could never do that. You automatically became like the people in your physical world, but now we have this virtual world where you can almost hang out with anyone you want and not even know them too, and become more like them if that's the lifestyle that you're seeking.
Yeah.
Proximity is power, right? And proximity, even with what you just mentioned, surrounding yourself with the content that you want to take in and the content that you want to surround yourself with. So thanks for sharing that. And I cannot wait for this documentary to see your parents' reaction to everything, including this recording. So I want to dive into, for me, you're an inspiration, Shervin, and not just because of your following your purpose. And we'll dive deeper into following your purpose. But I think, there's still this stigma out there. And I know that people that are in the world of yoga don't necessarily feel it, because sometimes you're not on the outside anymore, you're on the inside. But I do think that there's still this stigma or stereotype in most of America that not a ton of yoga teachers are male. And maybe you could disagree there, but I just want to say that I think it's growing in popularity. And I just want to know how you combat that. Like, do you feel that pressure that you're like this figure, that you need to be an inspiration, that you need to be a role model for men coming into yoga? Do you feel that pressure or have opinions there?
I don't feel the pressure. I definitely said, like, if you look at it statistically, there's a ginormous amount of females compared to males who teach yoga and also who practice yoga. And that's not noticed not only like at the last studio I taught at in San Francisco and I helped manage. I was the only male who worked at that studio. And now that I'm working in Denver, even at the headquarters of this yoga company, I think there's like 3 males, other than the IT team, there's 3 males who work at the entire office. Like my entire team is female. And I've never, I don't know, for me, it's just like, whatever, like I don't see it that way. But there are times I'm like, wait a minute, like, oh, I'm on this retreat, or I'm on this, like, I'm at this event and I'm the only guy here. Like, whoa, how did this happen? Like, it does sometimes cross my mind, but a lot of the times, it's just kind of like, we're all just people. Like, what difference does it make? And I think part of the reason that I'm kind of like, I don't really see it or recognize it often is it's almost like a bubble. And I forget that I'm in this like yoga bubble and like everyone kind of acts the same. It's only when I go outside of the yoga bubble where like people who don't practice yoga as often are like, whoa, like you do yoga, that's like so cool. Or like, how do you do it? Or I would never do yoga, that's just weird. Or I'm not flexible, so I can't do yoga. And I think those are the times, and then I feel like the pressure almost to be like, no, it's actually like, it's really good for you. And like, there's so many benefits. And you do yoga to get flexible. You don't get flexible and then do yoga. That's kind of backwards. It's like waiting to get clean and take a shower almost.
Yeah. And I mean, you were the only male at the retreat that you helped me with. So I was like, these are all the women, and then this is Shervin. And I just, that's a lot of, female energy to be around as well, for you. So I can only imagine, sometimes you must be just in your head rolling your eyes, but I think it's fun in a way. I think it's something that you are, whether you know it or not, a trendsetter, because I think that, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, we can look back and there's probably going to be so many more males that are involved in, the physical practice and the mental practice. And in a way, you're starting this trend, and you're, whether you know it or not, inspiring other people to go into it. And maybe we can talk a little bit about, your purpose and what you feel your purpose is, because I know your purpose is not just like yoga. That's my purpose, So like, what's the deeper meaning behind why you want to be in the field that you're in, and why you're doing what you're doing?
To feel good. I think my purpose, like right now, what I think it is to inspire other people to live the best version of themselves. And I think that's like, to kind of, even if that means going against the grain, like for some people that means like following the rules and going by the book, and that's totally great. But for others, I think where the challenge is just when you go against the grain. It's when you go against like what your friends tell you to do. It's when you go against what your parents tell you to do. It's when you go against what society tells you what to do. And I think I'm that type of person, and that's kind of why that whole like creating like a documentary type of thing that I guess I've now committed to, because I'm recording it on this podcast. Is that like I wanted to like document that journey to like show that it's okay if I can inspire like maybe just one other person to kind of see themselves in part of my journey. Like, oh, I am also similar to him in this one regard. So if he can do it, then that means I can do it too. And I think that is my purpose, because I remember like growing up, like seeing other people do things and connecting my own storyline to their storyline helped me take those big leaps, helped me make those big decisions, helped me really do the most impactful things in my life, the most exciting things in my life. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like I want to try to be that type of person to other people. And it's not, I think that comes in two parts. You have to do it, one, and then you also have to like share that story. A lot of people, I think, like to just live the private life and not share the story, and respect, like that's them. But I want to like share the story to inspire people after or while I'm doing it.
That's so profound. I think people resonate with just your story about following your purpose and not staying in some sort of career or path that didn't serve you, but served maybe some people around you, like your parents or, other people. And it wasn't really serving you. And you've broken out of that and followed your purpose. And I think that a lot of people have trouble with that. They struggle with that. So inspiring people to live their best lives is the best thing that you could do. And you do it just by living and documenting, like you mentioned. So that's amazing.
What sort of energy do you meet your family with now? With your new way of thinking, how do you meet them, when they may come off as not as understanding as you'd like them to be?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Fun fact, I actually met GaryVee in New York once, and I kind of asked him about this in the early parts when I was kind of going against the grain. I'd recently quit my job, and I was like, hey, like I quit my job, but sometimes my parents will like jab at me, like throw little comments here and there. It was a little frustrating. And he was just like, throw some jabs back. Which I don't know if that's the best approach. But what I do now, I think, is I really believe the people that you surround yourself with are the people you become more like. And like, I love my family, I love my parents, but I also recognize that like that's not the thought process and the life that I want to live. At least that's what I think right now. So I just try to limit my time with them. Like I still like spend time with them, but I also have to recognize that I need to kind of create boundaries in a way, whether it's like once a week, twice a week, or something like that, where I make sure that I kind of bucket the time and like say this is the maximum. And the why behind that is because I want to be a certain type of person. I want to take on certain type of actions. And I totally respect like their life philosophy, but it doesn't really meld with where I'm going. And I think that it's best to kind of create those boundaries early on, and keep it like mutual and respectful, and just being respectful to them. Like I'll spend time with them when we're at dinners, we'll talk. But when it comes to like life decisions or life steps, I minimize advice or minimize kind of like those conversations as much as I can, just because I know that their belief systems are different. But then again, it's also really good when I need some piece of devil's advocate, some like different way of thinking. So I'll use it, but I just make sure to limit how much information I take in and how much of that like thinking and ideal system I consume.
That's a great answer, because I was, as you were speaking and you mentioned boundaries, I was thinking boundaries. You know, what are your boundaries? How do you set them up? For me personally, I've had to actually state my boundaries. Like, hey, you know what? You just crossed the line, and I'm not you, you're not me, and you can't expect these things of me just because that's how you want it to be. I love you, but I'm gonna do what I want to do, type of thing.
And I think that's great. And like it's hard to do, but it's like if you really want something, like you have to do it. And one of the biggest challenges that like my parents saw my face on top of that, even when I say that, is like, we're your parents though. Like you have to do these things. Like it doesn't matter, we're your parents. And that's where it's like they create this ultimatum almost. And I'm like, well, I think like a normal person might be like, all right, well, F you, like I'm never going to talk to you again. But I'm just like, well, like there's no way that if you're not going to respect these boundaries, like there's not much I can do. So this is why I create like a physical boundary. I live farther away from them. I try not to live like in near vicinity. So it like creates more friction in terms of communication, like spending time. But I think that's inspired by them kind of saying like, no, like boundaries should not exist because we're family. So it's crazy, but you know, you got to do what you got to do for the dreams that you have.
Yeah, totally. And I get that, and I respect that. And a lot of people do that. They have those type of boundaries where they move or they have to state them. I mean, I wanted to get on this topic again, just for our listeners, you know, who want to get out of something where they feel like they're stuck in a box, and they're following the path that was sort of set out for them, and they're not happy. And they have this calling, and you know, you just have to know that boundaries, you know, that people may not like them, but that's not something for you to feel bad about. It's for yourself and your own well-being, and for them too in some way.
And some parents don't respect them. Like I've been lucky to be able to create, like almost still talk to them and have like kind of like a undefined boundary, even though we've talked about it. But some parents are just like outright no. Like if that's what you want to do, you're not our child anymore. One of my friends, he's like in this YouTube group, and his parents outright were like, if you're going to keep doing this, you are no longer our child. And they just totally like stopped talking. He hasn't talked to his father for like a year now. And like that. And he's like, well, this is my dream. Like, I have to do this. And he's inspired like so many people. And like, he's inspired me even. And I'm like, damn, like that's crazy.
Wow. That comes down to beliefs, right? Their beliefs, expectations, how they view the world. And I feel like it's almost like we're speaking to parents now. If our audience is a parent, if anyone in our audience is a parent, you learn from your child as well. They're not just, they don't just come into this world to do what you want them to do or what you expect of them. You kind of have to nurture what it is that they're interested in and learn from them and see how the journey unfolds for them. So
100%.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability. And I like to get deep with the family structure, because so much of our lives are really our entire world is programmed, and our blueprint is kind of created from the day we're in our mother's womb to like the age 10. They're really just showing us how to be, and whoever raises us. And then like you said, you sort of get to this point where it's like, wait, why do I think that? Where did that thought come from?
Yeah. And I think that's like self-realization almost, or like, it's like the ability to be like, look, yeah, like I can think differently. I can think on my own. And I think that's one of the most powerful tools you can have in your life.
Yeah, just having that conscious awareness of I get to think for myself. And I was going to say, some people never get there. So it's a blessing that you're there.
Mm-hmm. Gratitude every day.
So Shervin, in addition to setting boundaries, do you have any routines or habits or life hacks? You know, typically we ask people about their morning routine. So if you have anything that you do kind of as a ritual, morning, weekly, nightly, any life hacks for the people that are listening?
Life hacks, I think I do a lot of them. So I have two foundational habits that I believe are like the two keystone habits. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but like the two habits that if you do those habits, they have a domino effect in terms of making all your habits easier or just helping make general life better. And for me, it's self-reflection and physical activity. So every day I don't always succeed, but in the morning I try to journal, and I usually have the journal process has transformed over the years, but right now it's like, I'll do a gratitude piece, I'll do a priming piece, I'll do a favorite moment of the day, yesterday piece, and then one specific goal for today, whether it's personal or professional, and then I'll just free write. So that's my current journaling habit, self-reflection, to make sure that I'm like checking in with myself. And then the second piece is like physical activity. That's like moving meditation for me. So it's whether it's I go to the gym and lift weights, or I do like yoga, or both, or do some other kind of like group fitness class. But I try to do those things every day. And I've learned that when I keep those two habits, it's much easier to keep my other habits throughout my life. But yeah, I guess my morning routine is like, I'll wake up, I'll make bulletproof coffee, I'll journal, and then I'll get ready for work. And then some days I'll make breakfast and skip the coffee, or vice versa.
I just love hearing how everyone starts their day. It's just fun to hear like the little isms. And I love that you journal. I think that, again, that's another thing that is a vulnerable practice. And I don't think enough guys are into journaling and think it's cool. And I'm so glad that you're making that shit cool.
Yeah, I think so.
So any other life hacks you want to mention? Anything that you do throughout your day to stay energized?
It's just like testing. Like, I know everyone is different. I like Tim Ferriss a lot. I watch a lot of his content, and he has a lot of good like life hacks and like productivity stuff, and always learning new things and then testing those things on myself. And like, does that work well for me? Like one big thing that I've been doing lately is tracking my sleep. I got like this fancy ring, the Aura ring, and I love it so much. And it tells me like my body temperature, the different types of sleep that I had, how long I slept, and it gives me like a readiness score for the day. And so far I've learned that readiness score and like my body temperature, my heart rate throughout the night have had a big impact on like the next day. So now I can tell like, oh, I had a couple of drinks the night before. Now my sleep is like really impacted, and I see the numbers, and the next day I don't feel as good. Like that has been a huge impact on my life. I'm like, all right, well then I shouldn't be doing that. So I've made life changes just from like seeing those numbers on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. And I'm like, well, if I want to perform at my best, I need to have my best sleep. And I usually have to sleep like 8 to 9 hours a night, and I absolutely hate it. I don't like sleeping at all. But I've learned that I just have to like accept it and like slow down, and I can't force myself to stay awake and work. I just have to go to bed. So that's been like a life hack, is just sleeping more to what my body needs. And I think when you do a lot of physical activity, you typically need more deep sleep too for recovery. So that's been important to me. I've done a little bit of meditation here and there. I don't do it as much anymore. But a lot of it, I think, just tracking. Started to become obsessed with like fitness trackers, with any bio-related tracking. Like I started learning about like heart rate variability, and I sometimes track my stress levels and energy levels in the morning using like a chest strap that measures your heart rate and your heart rate variability. You kind of get a sense for like how I'm going to perform that day, and then tune accordingly. So just, yeah, experimenting and learning.
It's all about the data. And I feel like that's your engineering side coming in and saying, hey, I'm here too, and I can merge and we can be one.
Exactly.
I can help you too. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. And some people need different types of sleep. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because sleep is so important. And a lot of people don't track sleep. And nobody's mentioned that on our podcast, I don't think, so far. Somebody will probably correct me on that, but no, we haven't talked a ton about sleep. Yeah, we haven't, right? Yeah.
No,
and sleep is so important.
It's like, if you don't sleep properly, you can't do anything else.
Is there a moment in your life that you can share with us that was your most vulnerable moment? And it can be at any time. It can be career related. It can be love related. It can be anything. But when did you feel most vulnerable? And maybe it's something you haven't shared before, but we've come to find that asking this question really brings out the light, and it's been what the listeners are really most looking forward to hearing. I kind of gave you a long intro into that so that you can start thinking about your moment, but just wanted to kind of hear a moment that you felt really vulnerable with yourself and what you can share about that moment.
Ooh, that's a great question. I guess then my question back to was like, how would you define being vulnerable or vulnerability in your regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's personal as well. I think that everyone can define it differently. Like, some people think being courageous and being bold is vulnerable. I that's what I think, but having feelings, being emotional, being open, that's also vulnerable in my mind. But I think vulnerability is personal as well. So if you want to maybe give us a moment in time, and then you can kind of put your own feeling into it, your own Shervin vulnerability stamp on it.
Yeah. The first thing that came to my mind is like sharing the things that are most authentic to me, the things that I believe the most with the world, even though I might get made fun of it. I think that those are the moments where I felt the most vulnerable, and that's kind of how I would define it. And that piece for me is like when I publish certain videos about my life, where I'm like, wow, this is like, I don't really want people to watch this, but I feel like it's really meaningful, even though like maybe it's the moments like when I moved to San Francisco, I struggled with a lot of things in terms of like meeting new people and just being able to provide for myself in terms of like food. And I remember like recording that and then editing the video and publishing it. And I was like, wow, I'm happy that I don't have a lot of subscribers, so not a lot of people will watch this right now. But I know that I'll look back on this moment and be like, damn, how did you do that? And like people might look back on it and it might inspire them to kind of go through challenges and be like, oh, that's totally okay. Like I can be able to go through that experience. I feel confident that I'll survive. And I think those are the most vulnerable. And maybe that one moment for me is like publishing. I published like a year in review video. I've done 2 so far. And in those videos is where I share like the most vulnerable moments of the whole year. I share the successes, but also the most vulnerable moments. And I think each of those videos, maybe the most recent one was probably the most vulnerable moment, is like when I put that out there and I was like, damn, like people are going to know the things that I've done that were like very emotional, and I was not in the most comfortable space, and just sharing that literally with the entire world. And not a lot of people watched it, but knowing that anyone could watch it.
I watched it, Shervin. I'm one of the many who watched it. And I'm so glad that you shared that about San Francisco too, because Svetlana and I both have lived in San Francisco. You've lived in San Francisco as well. And I mean, sometimes it's a struggle financially, and you being authentic enough to share that video, I'm sure connected with so many people, like, I don't know what I'm doing for food. I don't know how to make friends here. Those are some of the same things that I was looking to when I moved to San Francisco and, started my business from scratch, and had nothing. So it's kind of like you resonate with more people than you think that you do. And you grow every time that you share something that's a little bit uncomfortable for you to share. So I'm just looking forward to your next year in review video. So for the one that you posted recently, what's the moment that you were like, oh my God, people are going to see that? What's like a moment that you can pick out for us?
I want to say it was the moment where I was because I'm 27, I was 26 at the time, but I'm 27 now. And like most of my, like I was in the tech industry. All my friends graduated. We're all making 6 figures plus straight out of college. And humble brag, I was making the most out of all my friends. And then I quit that journey. And a couple of years later, like all my friends are making more than any of us could have ever thought. And I'm living in a triple bedroom dorm at 26 years old, working a part-time job, making very close to minimum wage after all this. And like I was sitting on a foldable chair with the bunk beds in the background. And I was like halfway crying that like I can't, like I'm eating like ramen for dinner and peanut butter. And like that moment right there was like, wow, this is me being vulnerable. Like all my friends can look back and be like, you're an idiot. Like, why would you do that? You had this whole journey and you made the conscious decision to pretty much like leave such a quote unquote successful life to live in a dorm room at 26 years old, eating unhealthy food, teaching yoga. That like, for me, that was vulnerable because I was like, well, if all my like past college friends like saw that, they'd be like, what the frick are you doing?
That right there, like that's what we're talking about, like bold and vulnerable, right? Just sharing that sort of raw authenticity of like, this is what's going on right now, in real time, and it's really fucking uncomfortable. And you made this choice, and it's almost like there's probably this logical part of your mind that's going like, what the hell am I doing? And I mean, I want to really honor that, and honor you for following your path regardless, because I bet you're happier than most of your friends, the ones that are making 6 figures plus. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the money, right? Money's great, but also like, are they truly happy?
Yeah.
Or what's really going on? You never know, right?
You never, yeah. And I can never say like I'm happier than them. Like they could be just as happy living that life because that fits their personality. I think it's custom to everyone else.
Exactly.
I never want to like preach like, oh, this is the right way and this is the wrong way, or like if you hustle every day, like GaryVee, like if you hustle all the time, like you'll be happy.
I disagree with that notion, but that works for him, right? It's the same. It's like what you're saying.
Yeah, for some people that's like, you got to find your custom thing that best fits your lifestyle, whether that's hanging out at the beach every day and smoking weed, like that's cool, or like living in a bunk bed, that's cool, or doing a tech job 9 to 7, that's cool. Like whatever, if you love that, like do that. Respect, as long as you're happy.
I think it's also important for our listeners too, whoever hears this podcast, to know that your path is not linear the way that you think it is. It's not go to school, graduate high school, go to college, get married, have a family, get this job, and that's it. Boom, you're done. That's just not how life works. You're allowed to change your career as many times as you want. That doesn't make you right or wrong. So you got to do what's best for you.
And I think that's more true like in our time period than any other time period, only because of technology. And
I agree. Yeah.
Like just so much change is happening, is that like it's just easier to change jobs and easier to change, and it's almost like you have to change.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think everything's moving really fast with technology, whereas back in the day, it's like we didn't have that. So people would like, this is the profession they had and this is what they did and that's how it was. And that's probably why we bump heads so much with older generations.
Yeah. We're living in crazy times. And I love it.
Yep. So Shervin, like mentioning technology, what's your go-to source of knowledge, podcasts, books that you would recommend? What are your go-to like bits and pieces of knowledge? Can you drop some advice on the listeners and on us?
Yeah. I think Tim Ferriss, I love his stuff. One of the biggest things, the one thing that I think is the most impactful thing that I learned from him is he borrowed this thing from Stoicism. Anytime you're trying to do something that you're scared of, like a big decision, whether it's like leaving a job, leaving a relationship, starting a new job, starting a new relationship, moving to a new city, whatever that's like a big decision, he created these 3 questions that you can ask yourself And that's like, what's the best case scenario? What's like the thing that can happen and the best possible outcome? What's the worst possible outcome? And what's the worst thing that can happen if you make that decision? And then the third is like, what are the things that you can do to prevent that worst possible outcome? And when you go through those 3 questions, like I did this when I quit my job, you realize that the best case scenario is so big, and that the worst case scenario, in most scenarios, you might realize this is not as big. And then when you have the mitigations in that third category, you're like, wait, if I actually make this decision, it's probably a good idea because it's not that difficult to go back to where I was, or it'll just slow me down this much in the worst case, but the best case, it's exponentially better. So it's almost like, wow, I better make this decision, or else I'm losing out on all that opportunity. So like watching Tim Ferriss's video on fear setting, it's called fear setting. So it's not about like setting your goals, but rather defining your fears. And I would really recommend you watch, he has a TED Talk, a YouTube video, like watch that stuff and read that article. And I think if you can define your fears and like jump straight into them, then you can do anything you want.
I'm obsessed with Tim Ferriss, so I'm so glad that you mentioned it. I've read every single one of his books, front page to back page, and they're very large. So I am obsessed, and I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's a wonderful tool for people to use. And it's a very easy tool for people to use when they're making really big decisions, whether that's switching careers, your love life, anything that you want, financials, family, anything. You can go through those 3 questions, and it literally changes your entire mindset. It can change your brain. Your neurolinguistic pathways will change, because you're like, oh my God, this isn't going to be that bad. What was I making all this hype about? What was this fear even about? I'm very glad that you mentioned that. Any books that you're reading right now, or anything else you wanted to mention there?
No books. So I consume most of my information in video. I feel like that, for me personally, is like the best entertain and consume content. I do read books, but not as often. I think that's just my personality. But I think it's just like surrounding yourself, like finding those people that you want to be more like, and then consuming their version of content that best fits you. Like I read, but it's a struggle. So I don't like force myself to read all the time, and I'll read here and there. But for me, it's like videos. So I'll go watch like a lot of Tim Ferriss's videos, or I'll watch GaryVee from time to time if I need that type of dose. There's a group, like if it's all about like finding discomfort, I like watching this group, Yes Theory. Like just watching those videos and surrounding yourself with like that type of personality is like what I want, is to step outside my comfort zone, like challenge myself and fight towards my fears. So I watch like videos about that.
I think it's good that you know what you like, and you know how you learn. Because a lot of people are like, oh, all the most successful people read a ton of books, so I have to read a ton of books. And it's like they're reading, and they're actually not retaining any of the information. It's not sinking in. And so that's actually not the way that they should be learning. So I love that you know how you want to take in the information. And I think videos are awesome. So Shervin, how can people connect with you? How can people find you? Somebody out there that has a personal question, how can they get in touch with you? Or if you have any social media that you want to plug, what's that all about? And can you just kind of list those off for us and maybe spell them out?
I guess 2 things. My Instagram is @shervin.yoga, SHERVIN.yoga. More than happy to hear your story, and like if there's any way that I can help inspire you with my story, feel free to reach out. Or if you just want to say hi, go ahead. And then if you want to go watch the YouTube videos, you can. It's Shervin Shares. So same thing, first name, and then like shares, like I share things. So feel free to go check those out if you want.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast and sharing your golden nuggets and some of your life story as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity.
Thanks, Shervin.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Bold and Vulnerable podcast. For more information on today's speaker, please visit us at boldandvulnerablepodcast.com.
And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading the love by being bold and vulnerable. Thank you. We love you.